live. Actually, well, I guess, hold please, while the whole contraptionator just falls to the ground. Hopefully it's not a sign of how this show's going to go. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic whatever day you're watching this. So anyway, want to talk to you guys a little bit about that Hurricane 6-cylinder. And it's kind of interesting, really, if you haven't seen one, just some of my takeaways, at least first impressions of that engine. I was able to take a look at one this past week. And so if you haven't seen one, I kind of wanted to walk y'all through a little bit about what I saw with that engine, some things that struck me as interesting, and some things that I found that I didn't quite maybe understand about what they're really doing with, like the intake track, for example, looks really weird on that engine. And if any of you guys have any direct line of sight experience with that engine, I would love to hear your impressions of that thing, because I can tell you from what I was seeing, it was just kind of weird. So anyway, I'm going to check in with you guys real quick, and then I'll get to yammering about what I saw, at least when I was looking at that engine. Sovereign's in, what's up, saying mod on the job. Ardell is in as well. Good seeing you guys. So here's the thing. I had recently taken my wife's Jeep in to have some recall stuff done to it. And you know how it is. I mean, my job, I can pretty much work from anywhere. I mean, everywhere is an office for me. So the only difference was the location. So I was basically doing all my work, a lot of admin type stuff at the dealership. Funny thing though, I wrapped up the admin stuff, and as timing would have it, kind of luck would have it, they were kind of wrapping up the Jeep as well at about the same time. Perfect timing, right? And I had about 10 minutes to kill. And so I found myself wandering into the showroom area of this dealership, and I tucked away in the new section that they just built was one of the brand new Grand Wagoneers. Now, if you're not familiar with the new Grand Wagoneer, let me just tell you that it is basically a $110,000 just block of everything nice that you can imagine into a vehicle. Now, I don't know if it's $110,000 worth, but when you hop into that thing, it is, well, to say the least, the best that I guess Mopar has to offer right now. So when I was looking at that thing, I was looking at the window sticker, and it's got the 510 horse Hurricane inline 6. So I decided that I was just going to pop the hood and take a look, see what's going on in that thing. And a few things struck me as kind of strange. The first thing that threw me off was when you pop the hood, the engine cover itself sits sideways, sits longitudinally, and that's weird to me. Real flimsy too. You can sit there and play it like this. Blah, 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 blah. It's barely on there, which I found to be again kind of a quality issue. It's just the cheap plastic longitudinal engine cover, and yeah, and Sovereign say beauty cover is flimsy. To say that it's flimsy is an understatement. You can literally strum it and it'll blah, 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 blah. It just sits there and blah, blah, blah. So is there a word for that? Anyway, but the other thing is the way that the intake track looks. It's really interesting, but it is a true twin turbo, and as that it's a Y, so the inlet track Y's off to the two turbos. Feeding from a common airbox, one that you would see, any other engine going to. But it's strange because it's like this, almost like an accordion or a telescopic effect. Although it doesn't actually telescope, it looks like a telescopic effect, getting really big and then having this smaller radius inlet going over to that airbox. It was really strange looking, but when you look at the engine initially, it really does. I mean, if you're not even thinking about it, it looks like there's a V8 under the hood, just because that cover will throw you off. Another thing that was kind of cool, kind of weird is on the driver's side. So the left-hand side of the vehicle, car, truck, whatever you want to call this thing, that's where you'll find the turbos. That's the exhaust side of the engine. It has integral exhaust manifolds into the cylinder head. The turbos are actually stacked. So what was it? One side is higher than the other. In fact, I think the front turbo, I think, is higher than the other, or the other way around. I can't remember exactly, but it doesn't really matter. It is running external electronic wastegates. And the interesting thing about the external electronic wastegates isn't really the electronic wastegates, it's the fact that those turbos are clad in what looks like medieval armor, the reflective heat shielding and everything else that they've done to all the parts underneath the hood of that truck to try to shield the other parts that are all around it, which are the actuators for those electronic wastegates. So I found that to be pretty interesting, in that when you pop the hood, when you go looking for these, parts, they're right there. You can't really miss them if you know what to look for. But I found it kind of strange that those actuators were in the spot that they were in. I mean, not that it really matters, but I have a feeling that if 3 liters worth of displacement is making 510 horsepower and it's in something that weighs about 7,000 pounds, I would probably say that they're going to get hot. There can be some hotness underneath the hood of that thing. So I'm interested, though, to see if Dodge is going to put that engine into a car. You knew this was going to devolve into this part of the conversation, but in looking at that engine, it is long by comparison to the Hemi. If you're looking at the engine with the front engine accessory drive and everything else, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. That engine is at least about a foot longer. At least it looked like it to me. That thing looked like it was this wide. Or this long, I should say. And you would think that, right? I mean, it's an inline 6, 2 extra cylinders. V8's only got 4 in a line, but I don't know that engine would fit in the actual the LX platform. I don't see that as being possible. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. You can move some sheet metal around, but anyway, when I was seeing this thing in that Wagoneer, I was trying to think of, okay, well, how is this engine that I'm seeing in a truck, like a full-size truck, and it fits in the truck, that platform anyway, really nicely. How could that translate into a car? And if you could translate that into a car, that would be pretty cool. 510 horsepower is nothing to sneeze at. My only issue there, and again, this is just my own personal ignorance, okay? But hear me out. 3.5 liter EcoBoost uses 1 bar of boost, basically 15 pounds of boost to make 400 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. 15 pounds of boost is kind of the going rate for a lot of the 6-cylinder turbo engines. But the thing is that the Hurricane is using, at least in this iteration, the high output version, 26 pounds of boost. And the issue there that I have is I'll put it to you in this perspective. The EcoBoost guys don't like pressing the 3.5 liter past 22 pounds of boost, which is where the standard output Hurricane engine falls in line. Now, I understand. I'm comparing apples to kumquats here. I get that. But it's just when you start to work the math backwards and you start to wonder, well, I've got one engine with just a slight difference in displacement making the same power as another engine, but with a significant jump in boost pressure. Kind of makes you wonder why that would be. In other words, why would the 3 liter need 22 pounds of boost and a 3.5 liter only needs 15? you can even run that math backwards, sorta, when you're talking about the 2.7 liter EcoBoost. That one is at what, 16 or 18 pounds of boost, something like that. Anyway, it really doesn't matter. It's just really more of a mental exercise at this point. But I found it to be kind of interesting as I was looking at this vehicle and seeing the packaging of the engine. By the way, it's a clean package. I mean, it looks, if you could just take that stupid helicopter looking cover off of the top of the thing. I almost did that too, by the way. But if you just remove the cover, it's a clean install. So I don't know. It's one of these things where I would really, really like to see that engine, mainly the 510 horse, in an LX or some like a modified LX platform or some type of a car platform, but we'll just have to see. Remember that it's an all aluminum engine, so super lightweight, lots of trickery going on, especially when you compare it to a naturally aspirated V8. But I was really impressed by what I saw. I didn't drive the thing. I wouldn't really want, I have nothing to compare it to mentally, by the way. If you put me in a Grand Wagoneer with a 510 horse Hurricane or a 450 whatever horse SRT, 6.4, whatever they're rating them. I don't even know what they're rated at. I don't even pay attention to that. Is it the high horse? Anyway, I really wouldn't know. I mean, I wouldn't know which one I'm driving. I mean, I have to have them both on the lot on the same day to really give you my impressions of how it would drive. But I can tell you that an engine like that would be fantastic with an emphasis on performance. So anyway, let me check in with you guys, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Let's see. Greg saying, is the 392 done this year in the Durango and the Jeep Wrangler, as it's not a part of the Challenger or the Charger platform? So Greg, I'm not really sure. There's so many different things being said right now. The rumor mill is churning out all kinds of interesting things right now. The first rumor is what we've been told, that everything is ceasing, game over, with the Hemis in an automobile, not talking about a truck here. Anything truck related is kind of being spoken about from a separate standpoint. So there are those saying that the trucks will still get a 5.7 Hemi, that the big trucks will still be offered with a 6.4 liter Hemi. And of course, the diesels would fall in suit too. That would be the Ram brand. Now the Durango, also kind of falling under the same umbrella. I've heard that the Durango is going to keep moving forward with the Hemi, but we don't know yet. The main driver in this is the car going away, not the Hemi engine family itself. So you may still see Hemi engines available in other platforms. They just won't be directly available to you in a car. But that begs the question for me, why not just get busy with this new 6-cylinder? And here's the other ironic twist as far as I'm concerned. And guys, help me to understand this from a branding point of view. Why would Mopar, Dodge, Stellantis, Pickett, Jeep in this case with the Grand Wagoneer, why would they choose the most expensive thing that they sell with a sticker price, at least, from a Jeep point of view, luxury, ultra, all this? Why would they sell the engine into production consumption or general consumption with a $110,000 vehicle? I mean, you would think that maybe they would put it in a truck, but maybe then the volume would be so high, if they have a lot of problems, that would be a huge issue for recalls. I don't know how many of these Grand Wagoneers are going to be sold, but I can tell you that it's going to be far less than regular pickup trucks, and maybe that's the idea. Put it in something real expensive. If we only sell 5,000 of them, then all 5,000 implode or melt down, then you're only out that, as opposed to, $120,000, 120,000 trucks or something like that. I don't know. Kind of weird for me though. Sovereign saying, Michael's in saying, so how's it going, everybody? What's up? And Sovereign, yeah, it's covered. It's just clad in heat shielding. Um, Greg's asking, do you find out what the Hurricane can tow in the Grand Cherokee? I didn't really dive into it that deeply, but if it falls in suit with all the rest of the SUVs in its class, 7,500 pounds is probably an easy low number, more than likely. And that's just based on the weight of the vehicle also. So GVWR, I didn't look at the sticker, but I'd be willing to bet that it would at least be able to drag something the size of a pretty decent sized boat, Hellcat on a trailer or something like that. I'd say for most folks, I mean, you probably wouldn't want to drag more than about 7,500 pounds anyway. You could probably throw a travel trailer on the back, but then you're going to run into wind resistance, which you bring up a great point though. Remember that thing I was talking about with boost and the amount of power that the engine makes? It's a lot of PSI of boost per horsepower that you're jumping through to get that thing to make that kind of power. And ultra high loads, if you've got a travel trailer with a lot of wind resistance, it's got a lot of frontal area, means it's slapping the hell out of the wind, could easily be an issue for an engine that is relying so much on so much boost. Now, you can engineer anything to work, don't get me wrong, but it's a fuel quality issue that I'm more concerned with than an actual, can the engine itself manage it? Well, the engine itself's got plenty of power. It can definitely deal with that. But for me, it's more of a fuel quality proposition, and how much knock retard is that thing really going to be dealing with when you're trying to drag something like that down the road. Kind of interesting. Someone's asking, needs more boost, an inline versus a V? It's just a smaller engine, so it needs a lot more boost to make the power. It just feels a little bit weird to me for it to be running that much boost to make power that is, 22. Let's talk about the standard output for a minute. The standard output is 400 horsepower and change, I think, with 400 pound-feet of torque at 22 PSI, where the 3.5 EcoBoost is 400 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. So kind of a difference there, kind of a significant difference, actually. Wolf saying his daily is a BMW M340i with a B58 turbo i6, good engine. Scat Killer at 34 miles per gallon on the highway. Dodge's i6 could be promising. Sounds okay too. Look, it's got everything is there for that engine to do well. And I've been begging for a Conquest or a Starion revival, that nameplate revival, that type of car revival with this engine. And I agree with you 100%. It's no question that the B58 is good. The second I like the second iteration. I don't know if you want to call it a Gen 2, but I like the second generation with the actual exhaust manifold. I like that setup a little bit better than the integral with the two little thumb-sized holes, even though guys were getting crazy power out of those things. But I'm with you. In fact, I'm kind of a big inline six guy. I love the sound of them. Overhead cam inline sixes are some of the best sounding engines ever. But are we going to see that from Dodge? I hope so. I would like to think so, but I just, from looking at the packaging of this engine with the actuators for the electronic wastegates, and just the way that everything looked, I kid you not, guys. I was sitting there thinking, okay, I could literally have the whole right side of this engine disassembled in about 5 minutes. Upgraded turbos would be cake to bolt on. All you need to do is have them machined for the flange. On that head, it is just, it's begging for modifications, and they're just right there. Like you just take the thing right off. It's just there. So I was thinking, my God, this would be so easy to put a big single with an electronic controller. How much cooler would that be? Pair of hybrid turbos on the side of that thing, and again, it would be so easy to work on the thing. So I love it. In looking at it, I became more and more impressed by the packaging, and I became more obsessed with the idea that engine could in my wildest dreams, power something like a Conquest or a Starion or something like that. Oh, Ardell saying, I'd love to drive a vehicle with the Hurricane in it to feel and see for myself. You and me both, man. I mean, what kind of stinks is the fact that they put it into $110,000 Luxo barge. I mean, this thing is legit heavy, big, heavy duty thing. And I just don't know that you would get much of an experience out of it, but I think that it would impress you enough with the power that it makes. It's my understanding that the driving impression of it is basically like you're driving around in a truck with a 6.4 in essence, which isn't necessarily bad. It's just, nobody's really had an opportunity to play with them yet. So they're just now hitting the market. We're just going to have to wait and see, but I'm definitely looking forward to more and more driving impressions of them. Let's see. Oh, Clay saying, I don't know about you, but I would like to see a 5.7 or 5.7 liter Hemi Diesel V8 produced for the Chrysler 300 and Dodge Charger. The problem with that is universal appeal. Plus, it would have to be turbocharged to make any real horsepower. The Hemi head design is really only efficient in a diesel application if you have boost. You've got to, Hemi heads are extremely high in terms of volumetric efficiency, but they are very low in thermodynamic efficiency, which is really what you need in a diesel. That's why diesels will have basically a flat cylinder head, and everything that's happening inside that diesel combustion chamber is happening in the piston itself. That's the reason for that. They're going for the most thermodynamic efficiency that they can, and the Hemi just isn't there. And that's why you don't see Hemi diesels, and you don't really even see Pentastar heads on diesels when they're 4-valve. They're usually flat, and that's the reason why. But to your point, a more efficient V8 diesel, like a small V8 diesel, maybe a 3.5 liter turbo diesel or a 4 liter turbo diesel, would actually be pretty sick in these trucks. And, it would go far. But you got to remember one thing. In the States, we're just not very accepting of diesels. And with all of the restrictions and emissions contraptions that are put on diesels now, it's got a lot of folks kind of scared of them. Nobody really wants to work with, having to deal with diesel emission fluid or any other extra parts that have to go onto a diesel, particulate filters, things like that can potentially be a failure point. And so that's really more the issue. The eco diesel does well enough, but you just don't see the level of acceptance with it. Part of that is probably because of power output, but another reason for that, again, is just folks don't want to have to mess with it. Not for a vehicle that's not going to be doing a lot of towing. Sovereign saying, yeah, the Hurricane needs to prove itself. Hopefully it turns out to be solid and reliable. We shall see. Greg saying Cadillac for years ran all new technology for GM cars in their cars first. Maybe Jeep is trialing the Hurricane, and it's sold as an exclusive drivetrain. It could very well, and there is hope that it won't be exclusive to the ultra high-end stuff. But guys, I got to tell you, I'm not going to say that I'm pessimistic, but I'm also not going to get all starry-eyed over this. I can only hope and dream that they're going to do something that is going to be cool moving forward, and that something could have something to do with that Hurricane Inline 6. And the issue that I have isn't necessarily that, the V8 is going away or the internal combustion or whatever. It's that we are not there yet when it comes to EV technology it is not broad-based consumer ready, the technology. And what I mean by that is it's not going to be convenient for what is in essence 100% of the people that would be considered to be consumers for transportation appliances, for example. EVs are not that way. Gasoline is. And so because there is such a separation from reality when it comes to what some expectations are for EVs versus what reality dictates is, well, in essence, reality for living with EVs, a lot of folks just aren't going to warm up to it. So in saying that, you get the sense that Dodge has got to come up with something that is going to be the flag bearer for the brand, and it can't be the Hornet. All right, guys, look, I understand the Hornet's neat. Hybrid powertrain, it's going to be quicker than Scat Packs on the street anyway. So there's that to consider. But it's not exciting in the way that, I don't know, a competitor to the Supra would be, or a competitor to the Z would be. It's not exciting in that way. And so it's not like it's cool. It's like a forced thing. You know what it's like? It's like you're a kid, and let's say you got to go get school clothes, right? Your parents really aren't making a whole lot of money, and instead of getting Nikes, you get like falsies or whatever, and instead of a swoosh, it's like a lightning bolt, and it's like made out of cardboard. It's like those shoes. It's like those pants. Instead of Levi's, they're Lee Crease or whatever. It's just like it's an off-brand, and that to me is what the Hornet is. It's a forced off-brand, and it's making all of us that have been really happy to spend the money on cars that we enjoy and cars that help to fuel a passion that we have. We don't have problems spending money on those things. But when you force upon us a sticker package on a crossover, make it somewhat zippy, and then drag the GLH moniker across it, it kind of has the taste of shit. And so as great as that little thing may be, and as zippy as it might be, it's not the Hurricane Inline 6 in something that's shaped like a door wedge that will do burnouts for distance, handles really well, runs deep into the 11s in the quarter mile, and puts a big dumb grin on your face. Comes with a real 6-speed manual transmission or an HP 90 automatic. There are things that you can do that would to that with that powertrain and with that platform that I just laid out, that would be the new challenger, that would be the new flag bearer for Mopar Performance. Guys, I would be the flipping first in line to grab one of those. So just saying, I mean, that would be amazing for me. Plus, you would be bringing back this old school rivalry with US versus Japan's supercars and hot rods, if you will. Back then it was the Supra, the 300Z, the FTO, which would be the 3000 GT, the cars that were, which we would call the stealth on this side of the pond. The Eagle Talon comes to mind. There's a lot of DSM hot rods that you could really drag Cold War kids nostalgia member berries into this conversation and have some crazy awesome cars. And guys, if that's the case, now I'm not saying I'm an advocate for this, but I get it. Okay. If that's the case, let the Challenger go. Let it go. Let the Charger go if that's what you're going to do. If what you're doing is you're trying to bait nostalgia, when you're already doing that with the GLH moniker, that's a Shelby moniker for goes like hell. If you're going to bring back that kind of moniker and that era, that Shelby GLH era, that is Cold War kid era. That's my era. That's the stuff that I would just go nuts over. So, you know, but the Challenger thing, as much as I love and have loved and enjoyed my Challengers, the styling is from my father's and my grandfather's era. And I'd kind of like something for me, you know, why not? Hey, Mustang, you going to bring back like a Fox-inspired car? Anyway, getting back to the point, if Dodge did something with that engine, and I'm looking at that engine, I'm trying to think to myself how that would fit and how that would package, it would. And it would be a badass little car, I'm telling you, if they could make it. Handsome saying, yeah, BMW's had twin turbo straight sixes for years. Absolutely they have, and they've done exceedingly well. Haven't seen the clip that you sent me yet, but I do want to see that, Sovereign. Oh, Clay's saying a 5.7 Hemi V8 diesel. Yeah, again, that's why I was trying to explain. It's not like you can just make it if it was a turbo diesel, that would be what it would take, and that level of complexity, it would be completely different block. It'd have to be a high nickel block. It's a completely different thing altogether. In fact, a 5.7 liter diesel would actually be a fairly large diesel just in general from a V8 standpoint to put in any truck. To give you an example, the 6.0, 6.7 and all of that, the inline sixes and the V8s that are floating around out there, the Ford, the Duramax and all those engines, those are actually fairly large engines. And again, it's one of the reasons why it's, you know, they're heavy too. That's the other thing. So, you know, and they're also all forced induction. Whiskey's asking, any info to share about the power limits of the HP70? Sure, love to. So in my experience, on a Mustang dyno at roughly 550 pound-feet of torque, anywhere from 500, and this is again on a loaded Mustang dyno, somewhere between 550 and 600 foot-pounds of torque, the HP70 starts to get a little testy, if you will. That's where you'll start to see them start to slip. We would see that with supercharged 392s. These were supercharged 392s that were a little bit more wicked up than, like, say, your normal D1X with a race intercooler putting down like 535 or something like that horsepower to the rear wheels with like 520-ish torque. In that environment, if you're running stock tires and you're just building something to play with on the street, it's probably not going to get too deep into it. You're not going to find that transmission in too deep of water. And the reason why I say that, it's really only when you put a sticky tire on the thing and are running it really hard on the street or at the drag strip where you're going to start to significantly test the limits of that thing. But you will find them for sure at that power level. The other scenario, and this will lower that torque number just a little bit to like 5 to the rear wheels again on a Mustang dyno. So add about 8 to 10% for a dyno jet. But somewhere around 525 foot-pounds of torque, you may start seeing some of those HP70 slip if you're hitting it with nitrous, and it's just the way that nitrous hits. It's this much more violent hit of torque, even a positive displacement supercharger. So that's been my experience with those transmissions. I don't have any experience with the HP75 that is in the new DT Rams, but it's got a higher torque carrying capacity than the old HP70 does. But that may be because of gear ratios. I don't think there's too much internally that separates that transmission from the HP70. So Hopefully that answers your question. But again, that's been my experience with those transmissions. And if you lighten up the car, you can bump that number up just a little bit. Booze is in saying, how's it going tonight, B? Just picked up a 5.7 Magnum for a project today. Probably going to end up using drivetrain in my Bear Challenger shell. Very nice. That'll be a fun car. Owen saying, just looked it up. 2022 Grand Wagoneer with a 6.4, 7,700 pound with tow package. That's about right. I was pretty much right on top of it. Captain's also saying, also one of your thoughts on a cam selection for my 6.1 M6 Challenger. Was looking at stage 3A cam, initially 225, 234, 114 LSA, 592, 594. That's actually a nice little cam. Or the cam motion T2, 225, 235, 114, 594. Yeah, I mean, either one of those cams will do just fine with your car. 114 lobe separation angle is good. I don't know what the intake center line is. So if you see like 114 plus 5, that'll mean it's on a 109 intake center line, which is probably what most of them are going to be if they're ground on a 114. Really, either one of those is fine. You're not going to be over camming that car because the heads and that intake will do well with that size of cam. For a street car, for sure, it'll definitely be a lot of fun. For an off-the-shelf cam, it's pretty good. Personally, this is just me, but personally, I would try to maybe find something on a 112 or a 113 even. 114 is about as wide as I personally go for any of the any street cam at all. And that's because any wider than that and you'll start to wipe out mid-range torque. 114 is already kind of wide, but it's really good for a fuel injected car, especially one with really good heads and an intake like that package that you have. So both of those would be really good. And if you're trying to choose between which cam, again, look at the intake center line. I am willing to bet that they're either ground on a 109 or a 110 intake center line. For your car, I would probably say it's not going to make a difference. 109 would be just as good as a 110. I just don't like to see like 111, 112s because you end up, especially on a 114, you end up getting this soft hit that just kind of carries. It doesn't really ever snap. So if you're going to 114, I'd rather it be a little bit more advanced. So 109, even a 108 would be good. But I would not want to see a 114 on, say, a 112 intake center line, unless you were putting together a cam for a car with a positive displacement supercharger. And then I would probably split it out a little bit farther to make more power on the big end and then rock it back to where, damn skeeters, and then rock that cam back to where you can capitalize on making power on the big end and just hang the thing on the compressor down low. That's the way I've always put the cams together for my guys. Someone saying the style on the Hornet is not exactly what I call exciting. Clay's saying, yeah, with the biodiesel. Yeah, I mean, that is true. But again, you're still going to deal with all the diesel particulate filters and everything else that comes with it. So, and most people that are buying diesel, they're not buying it because it's clean. They're buying it because they're either doing a lot of long haul driving or they're towing something. Whiskey saying, I think the Hurricane would have been marketed a lot better in some form of sports car or GT coupe. The Wagoneer is going to appeal mostly to middle-aged women and moms. Man, I'll tell you what, that thing is a barge. I mean, it's such a weird. So when the Hemi first came out, it came out in pickup trucks. And then it bled into everything else. I would kind of hope that they would have come out maybe with the standard output inline six for the trucks in the same way. In fact, I was kind of licking my chops hoping that they would have done that. I'd have been one of the early adopters of that technology. It's just they didn't, and I've got Stormy, and man, I'm kind of partial to Stormy. Although I will say this, I am going to at some point have to bite the bullet and put 355 gears in that truck. I know I'm such the champion of 321 gears. They're great for getting the truck out of the hole at wide open throttle. When you talk about wheel speed and coefficients of friction, anyway, all that stuff. And yes, the truck has got a quickest of a 1363. But let me just say this. There are partial throttle time situations, like the 321 is great when you're wide open, but there are times when I just want a little bit more out of that truck. And I always thought that the 355 gear ratio would be perfect for that transmission ratio that is in the new HP 75. And it would wake the truck up a little bit under certain partial throttle conditions. Where the 392 is really good is, and this is the 3.92 gear ratio for the trucks. I know I'm kind of switching gears here, but where that gear is really good is under partial throttle. It just makes the truck feel light, but it just lights the tires up from a dead stop. It's kind of flat on the highway, so to speak. At least in my experience, and can be a little bit buzzy too. Anyway, working on something right now to put 355s in Stormy. I am probably going to end up keeping that truck for a long time. I really do like that truck. Clay's talking about the diesel cars from the 70s and 80s. Man, you're one of the very few folks that would have liked anything from GM with a diesel. Most of the folks in that era were all looking at Mercedes and European cars for diesel technology. Sovereign said, I'd like to see the Coronet return. You know, what's funny is that nobody is really interested in big sedans anymore. It's just not a thing. Everybody wants these crossover contraptions, and it's a shame because the 300 with just changing the face of it could have been rebadged or renamed a Coronet, and that would have been really cool. It would have been really nice if they'd offered that 6.4 or a Hellcat option for that body too. Someone said return of the Dodge Sprint RT with a Hurricane 4. I'd want to have something rear wheel drive, man, not front wheel drive. But either way would be cool as hell. I mean, I'll take anything that's fun at this point. That's not a crossover. White Knuckles in. What's up, B? Checking in for a little late. It's all right. Good to have you, buddy. Clay's liking the Plymouth nameplate. Got the Aries and the LeBaron. Clay talking about the 2.7 liter V6. A lot of the early Mopar V6s, I say early, the 90s, like late 80s, early 90s, some of those actually, I take that back. The non-Mitsubishi V6s were, the 3 liter was actually pretty good. Let me think about this for a minute. So yeah, the 2.7, a little bit suspect, but not necessarily in the Prowler. The Prowler is actually pretty beefy V6. But some of the other later LX or any of the V6s really were just a little bit, I don't know. Those are always the ones you see smoking going down the highway. Sovereign just resent me that link. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Clay, that's what we're talking about. Talking about that Hurricane Inline 6 in a sports type car like the Starion. So we're saying, hit that like button. Clay saying, I'd really like to see the Chevrolet Monte Carlo come back, or even the Ford Thunderbird. So, you know, this kind of sucks. I was kind of a T-Bird fan back in the day. I thought it was a neat car. And it's just one of those things where they will not make another car unless it's a Mustang. It's just not going to happen. Chevrolet, as far as a front engine rear drive platform, I don't think that they are anywhere close to coming out with another internal combustion engine. You want to talk about somebody that is complying. It's Chevrolet. Ford is just kind of doing their own thing. They're making vehicles that people want to buy. So there's not really a passion project necessarily in the works that doesn't have Mustang associated to it. If Ford's going to make something that's hot, it's either going to come in the guise of a Mustang or it's going to come in the guise of a truck, stuff that is characteristically pretty macho on their part. The rest of it is just transportation appliances, which if Dodge would follow suit with that, would be a fantastic business model to emulate, because that's something that Ford is doing really well. I mean, let's face it, Ford just took top dog status in terms of NA horsepower. The Ford with the optional exhaust is making 486 horsepower as opposed to the 485 coming out of the 392. Definitely not something to be ignored. And so with Dodge kind of being the de facto horsepower leader, at least decided to make themselves that when they came out with the 6.1 liter. That kind of started some horsepower wars back in the day versus the Coyote is what we're talking about. 411 versus 4.25, and you just saw them going back and forth. That's why for me, it would only make sense to slap that 510 horse Hurricane into, again, some new Starion-like platform that could go up against the Mustang, and it would go up against the Z car, and it would go up against the Supra with another neat little twist. You see, back in the day, it was Mustang was the NA V8. That was the NA V8 hot rod, right? And it had its own following. It had its own group, its fan club. But everybody knew the Mustang. Everybody knew the Supra back then. It's a turbo inline six. It's a small engine with a big turbo. It makes power that way. Had its own group of fans. You had the 300Z crowd, the Nissan crowd. Yeah, it's twin turbo, but it's a V6, a little bit different styling. Good looking car, by the way. Then you had technologically advanced stuff like the 3000 GT, aka the Stealth, FTO. Something that for kids today, it was like having your own sort of version of a Skyline-ish, because you get it in all-wheel drive. And it was a fairly just kick-ass car. I mean, all of them were badass back then. And you had this kind of, it was like this game of rock, paper, scissors in a way. Like one car could do one thing better than another, but it couldn't do it as good as this. And it was just kind of a neat period of time. You could actually bring that back. And in a lot of ways, it would make sense to do it now. With the Z car being as good as it is, with the Supra being as great as it is, think of how awesome it would be to now take that Hurricane inline six, plop it into something that has some historical significance with the DSM cars. And again, I'm going to keep going back to the Starion. Look them up if you're not familiar with them, and you'll catch a glimpse of why I love those cars so much. But you would have the makings of a brand new four-way slugfest. And actually five, if you kind of want to give the nod to the four-cylinder turbo Mustang as well. I mean, that would be the entry-level car comparison to all of these. But, Mustang would have two fighters in the mix. Dodge could have two. One standard output Hurricane, 400 horsepower. Sounds like a good beginning to me, right? 510 for the hot rod version. You got the Z car at 400 plus horsepower, and you got the Supra at what is in reality about 430 horsepower. That would be such a neat, it'd be such a cool existence to have those types of cars going at it again. I'm cool to see the V8s go away. Not that I want them to, but there was a time back in the 80s where V8s were considered to be basically kaput. A lot of folks didn't think you're going to have V8s for very much longer because there was such an attractive alternative with boosted smaller engines. Well, you apply the same technology that you did to the little engine to the big engine, and now you've got really efficient hot rodded NA V8s. And again, that's what helped to bring the V8s back into the forefront. Here's an opportunity to just take what you started and move it on down the line. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I was kind of excited to take a look at that Hurricane Inline 6. And aside from just the propeller head looking cover on the thing, I got to tell you guys, it was oh God, embarrassing to look at. And again, I understand why they did it. It literally, if you look underneath the hood of that Grand Wagoneer, it kind of does look like a V8 under the hood. So it's just once you start looking at it, you go, oh man, that's an inline 6. How neat is that? So let's see. Bad KZ saying, I always love the interior of the Starion. Had really nice leather seats. So fun fact about that, had a buddy that had one. Actually had a couple of buddies that had one. One had a white one had a black one. And I was head over heels in love with those cars. And I loved driving them. And we used to, and so to give you guys an understanding, so a Starion is a really cool car. It's a DSM, so Diamond Star Motor Car. It's a conglomeration between Dodge and Mitsubishi. Had two different cars, Starion and the Conquest. The Starion was the Mitsubishi version. The Dodge was the Conquest. And what they were is they were front engine, rear drive. It had a 4-cylinder turbo, but it was a big 4-cylinder. It was like 2.6 liters. It was practically the size of a V6, but it was a 4-cylinder. And it didn't really rev that high, but it was really torquey for what it was. I mean, it was basically a V8 power plant production out of a 4-cylinder. It would go head to head with like a 5-liter V8, if you will. And I remember distinctly driving that car, going out sniping after Fox body Mustangs. And it was just a really fun car to drive. Now, by today's standards, no, they're slow. I get it. But back then, when you're a kid, that you may or may not have even had your driver's license when you're out there running around racing these things. I had an early start. So anyway, I got to where I could just wring one of those cars out, and I had so much fun in them. And remember, again, back then, nothing was all that fast. So everything was kind of the same speed, which is, again, interesting for me why Dodge isn't coming back to that part of their history. Cars like the Starion were a big deal, but you also had cars like the Daytona, the Shelby Daytona, which was a front-wheel drive car that would more than hold its own against V8s of the day too. So kind of an interesting thing. Dodge was doing things a little bit differently, and I loved it because it was something completely different. And it was kind of the wave of the future. It was just an evolutionary tree that may have just not necessarily hit a dead end, maybe just a pause button. Let's see. Yeah, Clay's mentioning some old school Cold War era stuff. So we're saying Conquest kind of looks like a short Daytona. It does. So a Conquest looks like a shorter, wider version of a Daytona. Like if you could say, man, what would a rear-wheel drive Daytona look like? Look at the Conquest. That's kind of what it is. And so yeah, there are a lot of neat cars back then. And if you're into front-wheel drive hot rods, that was the genesis. You had hot rods that little turbo inline fours that were going in the Omnis with the GLH, with the Dodge 600, which is kind of the predecessor to the Sprint, which was a neat front wheel drive 16 valve car, which is oddly really quick for its day. In fact, I just saw one last year at an 8th mile track, a clean looking red Sprint RT. I haven't seen one in years. They're a lot of fun. But these types of cars also help to gain acceptance for hot rod front wheel drive cars that were coming from overseas. Then you start to just get into more of the evolving of that platform. You get into, the SRT4s, which, by the way, sidebar here, somebody in this town, and I just saw it at the gym the other night, has got the slickest looking SRT4. This thing looks like, it looks like 2004 all over again. Dropped on inkies, has that real pretty blue color with a carbon fiber hood. It is absolutely like tugging at my heartstrings. So whoever's got that car, man, props to you. Just such a good looking SRT4. But anyway, those are the types of cars that started to bring those types of cars to the forefront. And fun fact, when I very first started to learn how to tune, like computer tuning, was a guy that had a Civic with an Integra engine with a big turbo. And this is 100 years ago when I was running a dyno for a guy. And he was tuning with Apex, and this thing put down over 600 horsepower to the front tires. And this car is just a shell, but it was the first time that I was ever shown how everything worked. And it was really cool. The guy that was showing me was really good with this system. And apparently he was I didn't even know the guy. He's fairly high up in the import racing scene at the time. So anyway, kind of a cool story, but again, those types of cars from the 80s helped to usher in some of these cars that we can enjoy today. It's just the technology bled into it. So anyway, if we can see something like that, that would be really cool to see come down the pipe. Casey saying he had the Achieva SCX, W41. Lots of cool cars from back then, man. Clay's talking about some of the same cars from that era. Handsome's asking, Professor B, have you ever driven a 328 330 BMW with dual turbocharged? Yes, I have. And I will say this, they are underrated engines, to say the least. The 330 is the one that blew my mind. And then the same guy that had one, I think it was Vishnu, he had a Vishnu calibration put on it. Anyway, long story short, it was fast already, a lot faster than what I thought it was going to be. And then it's just, the difference is night and day when you're talking about cars like that and powertrains that are already set up for boost. You've got the turbos there already. There's already so much you can do to make power with those things. And it's just all there waiting for you. And again, that Hurricane Inline 6, for any of you guys that are thinking about taking a look at one or hot rodding one, it is as simple as it sounds, as I'm making it sound. Check out some pictures of that thing. Look at the driver's side or the left side of the engine when you're looking at it, the right side of the engine from the front of the vehicle. And you will see the two turbos hanging off of there, just begging you to do something with them. Tuxedo Blacksins, hey, B. Mason. His grandma just got a 23 RAV4, very nice, dark red. Saying, I hope it'll last for eternity. All you got to do is keep the oil changed and keep up with routine maintenance. Should last you a very good, very, very long time. But Guys, with that, we're coming up right at an hour. I got to jump off of here, but I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me. If you get an opportunity, check out that Hurricane Inline 6. Check out some pictures, study it a little bit. Let me know what you guys think. I'm pretty impressed with it. Matter of fact, I'm thinking that if Dodge can just figure out how to bring back some nostalgia from the Cold War kids era, I think that that thing has a real strong opportunity to be a hands down winner and a stone cold killer in the new era of these hot rods. But anyway, let me know what you think if you get a chance to check it out. But with that, guys, get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. Guys, would not do this without you. Love each and every one of y'all. And with that, that is a wrap. Y'all are a great one. Take care.